Okay, welcome back to the show. Thanks for listening to this one. Today we've got a familiar face if you've been listening to the podcast for a little while. I'm here with my sister Kailey.
Hello.
And we also have two special guests in the building. We've got Amanda Lewis and Brennan Lewis, our cousins, me and Kailey's cousins. So thank you for coming on. Yeah.
Thanks for having us. I'm a big fan.
No problem. Yeah, I think we can have an interesting podcast today. I think I won't go into too much detail as to what we're going to talk about, just to keep the curiosity flowing for those listeners. Not because I'm not exactly sure, but we'll get into some good topics. And one of the things that I definitely want to talk about with you guys is family relations and how family expectations definitely guide where we go in life. So for sure, my immediate family has definitely guided my decisions and my career paths and life paths in general, but I think extended family definitely has an impact as well. Have you guys, I'll pass it over to Amanda and Brennan for this one. Have you felt that extended family has had a big impact as far as your decision to take a certain career path or maybe even get into relationships with certain people? Has that had a big influence on where you end up going in life, do you think?
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, I wouldn't say so, actually. I think it depends on your family size and dynamics, like your immediate family. For me, our immediate family is already quite large. There's, 4 of us and the kids, and then there's our 2 parents. So I feel like that's already enough opinions to kind of take into consideration.
Yeah.
So definitely my immediate family has had a huge impact on career, relationships, everything in my life. But not so much my extended family. I wouldn't say so. What about you, Brennan?
Yeah, I think I'd agree for the most part. I do think that my immediate family, especially my parents, I would say more than my siblings, but just thinking like even when I was in high school and figuring out what to do in life, like I actually had no clue, and I was like, all right, well, what did my parents do? What did my dad do? And then it shifted down to like, well, what did my brother do, and what did my sister Amanda do? And it was like, oh, they all went into business or accounting. It's like that's what I'll do. And it's like, I honestly, like, when you're 16, 17, you're not even giving it much second thought. You're just like,
no,
yeah, like they did it. I may as well do it too. And like,
yeah, that's so true.
Yeah.
Because our dad went into science and is like just very intelligent in the science world. I was like, I should do that, and then quickly realized that I like don't have the abilities to do that. So got out of there quick. But yeah, I similarly was influenced greatly by immediate family, and then I felt kind of with extended family because we get together at holidays and a few times throughout the year. But because we have such a large extended family, there always just seemed to be that tone of supportiveness with everyone. You'd get to the family dinner and people would just be like, "What are you up to?" And there wasn't really the like great opinionated like conversations that you have with your immediate family, where maybe there's more share. You're kind of saying like, "Oh, I don't think you should do that," or your parent or sibling is like, "Oh, that's silly. Don't go into that." But with extended family, people, I guess, were just politer about it.
I think it's more like they were more like cheerleaders rather than judgment.
Yeah, it's just like, okay, great, you're doing that now.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the extended family was more so just supportive. I don't know if everyone in the family would feel the same way.
No,
but maybe that was just our experience.
I know. I agree. It's not. Yeah.
Yeah, I think as the circle expands, the influence is less and less. Like if you have some like second distant cousins, they're not likely to have a big impact on what you end up doing in your life. But like you're saying, Brennan, it's like you first maybe turn to your parents, and then after that's happened, maybe you look to your brother and your sister, and what are they doing? And I think it's been very, very similar. I'm sure you guys, being our cousins, have had influence on my life as to like what I've ended up doing. But to be realistic, yeah, it's probably parents are the one of the bigger factors, because they're with you the whole development, and they're kind of guiding you what subjects you should take in school, what universities and all this. So that's a massive impact.
Yeah, definitely. And then I would say, like, after immediate family, I would say the next biggest influence would be more like your closest friends, maybe. And
yeah.
like,
True.
Might even be 50-50. I feel like we're like, because you can get tied up with a group of friends and that almost maybe 50-50 or even more, where that overpowers what your parents are guiding you to do. Your parents might want you to go to this university, but all the lads are going to whatever other university, so you end up going that way.
That's true. That's true. And I think it is like who you spend time with.
Mm-hmm.
Especially at a younger age, I'd say, when like your friends are your family, especially in high school, they mean more to you probably than your parents do.
It's true.
What's that quote? Like, you're comprised of your 5 closest friends.
Oh,
or whatever?
the 5 people you spend the most time with, or
you're the average.
That becomes you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely is true. And Kailey, you mentioned the supportiveness of the family and of the cousins, and I feel like that has been something for sure, is that within the family and the extended family, everybody's generally supportive. One thing I find really interesting about the family is that you create these connections with other people that so you end up being connected to people that if you were to just meet them randomly, you might not actually have any connection with them, but you're joined together with them. And in some sense, people are often tied together that they might even sometimes prefer not to be. But it's an interesting thing. I'm not saying that I feel that in any way, but you definitely see that in some families where it's like we're locked together whether we like it or not.
You're bonded together by blood.
Yeah, exactly.
But even more so once the family becomes extended, when you have like in-laws and then cousins, spouses, and babies and all that stuff, like it becomes quite extended. Like you're right, it's a lot of different personalities mixed in together that normally wouldn't maybe hang out together, which is kind of a great part of having a big family.
It's true. Like I think for that aspect it's really great having a big family. And then I was also thinking, on one hand, we get together at family gatherings and we celebrate the biggest holidays together, and then at the same time you could feel like you don't really know your family on the close level, that, or you could feel misunderstood at a big family gathering because people see you for the few hours you're there, and then they're like, oh, that's what that person's like, and then you see them the next holiday, but you maybe don't really
you get
know them that
nice, well. Christmas attire on and show up for turkey, but that's not necessarily you on the daily basis.
I would definitely tend to agree with that. I think from my own experience, and I'm sure you guys have experienced this too, where you don't see maybe a distant relative, or they don't even have to be that distant, to be honest, and like maybe it's been 6 months or something, they're like, oh, like, so how's biology going? And I was like, no, I'm in not that drastic maybe, but it's like it's like, oh, like I was second year university. It's like, no, I graduated last year. It's like, but
that's very true.
And it's like, do you like do you correct them, or you just go along with it? So it's like, that's one thing. And then also I think I don't want to shine like the bad light, but we're all speaking like very, very like
candid.
Everything's happy.
You know what? Yeah, for the most part it is, I would say, though.
No, I know, but I have a feeling you're going the opposite way.
No, I wasn't gonna go down that path necessarily, but it's like
that is true though, that we're like there's definitely cousins even that I'm not exactly sure what they're doing. So if they just showed up at this point, I would be like, I know a rough idea what each person's doing, but you don't often know exactly, and by the time you see some people, it could be 3-4 years later, so you don't know, were they in biology, were they in accounting? Nobody has an idea.
It's true. And so both sides of for Ollie and I, both sides of our family are quite large, and our mom's side of the family is growing at an exponential rate, and so there are certain like cousins' kids we haven't even met for, like, they've been it's been
some of them we
years.
actually have not met, at least cousins' children.
And it's weird because when we were like growing up, I feel like we spent a lot of time together at family gatherings and all that, and then it's weird when you become an adult and that changes as people start their own families, and with travel and people being able to be all over the globe, you don't have that same connectedness that maybe was there prior, where you would have stayed in touch with all these people. But now we have these cousins that I can't tell you very much about their lives at this point.
No, I think the dynamic that we have here right now actually is pretty interesting, and I feel like it's pretty fortunate that we were able to have this, where for people who aren't aware, Brennan and I are the same age. Amanda and Kailey are also the same age. So to have a cousin that's the same age and in similar have similar interests too. Yeah, I grew up in Ottawa together, so I feel like that's actually quite a rare thing. Have you guys had what have you thought of that growing up? Because I feel
did
like
I like the experience?
I think we should also mention that we also have older siblings, all of us, who are all the same ages, so our entire families are identical, not the exact same, boy girl or whatever, but
the same
age, so
same ages. Our parents, when they heard that Brennan and Amanda's parents were having a child, and then my parents had a child, so we're like 6 months.
It was so great growing up, you know, to have. But I just want to go back to Kailey's point about how, like, you know, as we grow older, you know, things shift in families, you know, as it gets bigger and bigger. And it's kind of one of the things I thought about before coming on this podcast was like the growing pains of getting older and, you know, having your extended family, your cousins being such a big part of your life. And then, you know, especially at family gatherings where everyone could get together because no one had spouses and other commitments, you know. So it's one of those things that I feel like maybe we're all in a transitional period, and we've been in this position for a couple of years maybe, where your extended family becomes like it's harder and harder to see everyone, and because everyone's making their own little families now, you know, we're at that age, maybe not yet, but eventually for some of the people in the room. No pressure. You know, but we're going to be making our own little families soon enough, and then they're going to have their own cousins, like our kids will have their own cousins, and then it just becomes extended, and it gets harder to keep in touch with everyone. And so I think it's one of the growing pains of getting older.
It's true.
Yeah, and I wanted to bring up the family expectations and how that's probably shaped each person. And for you specifically, Amanda, I was thinking how your personal expectations for maybe goals and achievements that you had in mind has shifted as your personal family has started to grow. So now that you've had a son, have you found that things have changed and your personal goals are in some ways maybe set to the side a little bit, and now George his goals are a little bit more of a priority?
Yeah. So I have a 1-year-old. He just turned 1. He's my first kid. So yeah, it's interesting. So I just went back to work on Monday. So this week I've been back at work now for a week, and it's interesting. I think it's weird. All of a sudden you go back to work and you're like, oh, this was my life before. I showed up and that was all I focused on when I arrived. But now in the back of my head, I'm thinking, okay, I got to leave at this time if I want to make it home for, you know, dinner, bath, and bedtime, that type of thing. So I think what's shifted for me is that priority. And I've communicated that with my work and my coworkers. And I said, you know, it's not my priority anymore, and in a polite way, you know, and that I want to leave at, you know, a certain time so I can get home in time for that important stuff for me. So luckily for myself, I was able to achieve a lot of my educational and career objectives before having kids. I know that's not the case for everyone, and the timing doesn't always work out that way. But for me, I feel like I achieved quite a bit before I had kids, that I don't feel the pressure on me as much to excel in my career. And I think it's humbling having a kid, and it's like, all right, well, I don't come first anymore. My goals don't come first anymore. But it's very, for me, it was very natural to have a kid and to go, all right, this is my focus now. And it's one of those things I think you know is coming also. It doesn't come out of nowhere.
Right.
When you have a kid.
No, I think that's well said. And I think a universal thought I've heard that from other people saying that, they'd be up to like, you know, 9 p.m. thinking or whatever, 6 a.m. thinking about work or doing work. And then you have a child and suddenly it's like, oh, like, heck no, I'm leaving at 5 or like 4:59. I'm not staying a minute later because my child now is the priority. So
I think for the time being, at least seeing what my siblings have to not go through, but raising their beautiful children, It's it's really good birth control in the sense that I just know from my own life and where my responsibilities are right now, I'm just not quite ready for that sort of next level of responsibility. But I wanted to ask you guys actually, because I know for myself, like now that I'm creeping into my mid-20s, well, I'm there. It's like, all right, well, looking into the next like 5-10 years, like am I supposed to be like married and have kids and have all these growing responsibilities, and I don't even make my bed in the morning and stuff like do those thoughts ever like creep up on you guys where it's like, oh, like
that's a good question actually, or go ahead if you
and like do you have like, is it something that you like deeply desire? Because like for me, I know I want a family eventually, but I don't know if it's just because I'm like still a bit like thinking like in the no responsibility, more like lax lifestyle, like more thinking about myself, or it's just like I'm wondering if like it'll ever be the point where I'm like, okay, like I'm ready to have kids, I'm ready to get married, or it's like just gotta bite the bullet.
It's a great question. I also think there's no right or wrong, and so what's awesome about what you just said is that you're just thinking about it and thinking about what feels good for you. So there isn't a timeline, which I think is really great with the way that things are moving, that people are getting married later in life, having kids later in life, because that's okay. That's okay to decide. And actually, when you brought that up, Brennan, I was thinking about, we were talking about supportiveness at at our extended family gatherings. And then at the same time, I almost feel like within our extended family, there is a little bit of pressure to maybe do those milestone things where people are saying, you're getting married soon. When are you guys going to have kids? And like, we're like, when's this coming? And so no hate on the family, everyone's supportive, but there is that underlying tone where there is an expectation maybe of when you I
definitely
bring the girlfriend, boyfriend around, and then suddenly, someone's asking, all right, what's next?
And those probably are like pretty typical questions that you're going to get at family dinners. And I don't think just our family dinners.
No,
like I've heard other people, you go to family dinners and it's like, so like marriage, like what are you thinking? Like when's that coming along?
Yeah.
And I'm like you, Brennan, where like you feel a little bit of a pressure for this timeline. And I think that's, being the youngest, you kind of watch your older siblings and you feel maybe a little bit of a pressure to follow those same footsteps or follow those same timelines. And for me, I know how big of a shift in your life it would be to have kids and get married. And if there are, I guess, maybe more selfish, in some ways, that might be the best word to use, but more personal goals that you want to achieve, you kind of want to get those out of the way first. And like you were saying, Amanda, you feel as though you did, which I feel like that's like an optimal situation where you feel as though you got these things out of the way and now you're good to go to settle down and start making a family. But
that's a good point, because you guys, so Brennan and Ollie are 4 years younger than Amanda and I, and then we have siblings that are 2 and 4 years older than Amanda and I. And I do think as you get older and age becomes less of a, you're not talking like grades or specific milestones like 16 and 21 and all that. Ages become more arbitrary. And so as we get older, for you guys, I could see how it might be more pressure, because you see us doing things. And now that we're just all kind of lumped in together as being in like our 20s, 30s, you maybe have more pressure to be at our level sooner than like, let's say our oldest siblings would have at 25.
I definitely, I don't know if it's pressure. I guess it's pressure, like a lot of like hinting, because I think like that like we're the youngest of 4, Ollie, like in our families, and I would say my siblings all definitely got married like on the younger side, like in, how old are you, Amanda?
26. Yeah, definitely we all got married younger than average.
But I feel like it's just a byproduct of being the youngest sibling in a family. Is like generally it's like, all right, like your turn, or like when are you getting the where's the girlfriend, or like and it extends even to your like extended family, where like you see those memes of like people's aunts or uncles, or usually not uncles, actually it's mainly aunts, but it's like, oh, so like Christopher, when's when are we meeting the lucky lady, and it's like they leave the dinner all sad. But I definitely hear those comments and like people hinting and stuff, but like at the end of the day, like I'm in a happy relationship right now, but I like to think that when I'm ready to.
Yeah.
But sorry, go ahead.
Oh, finish your thought.
But Ollie, you were saying like get your goals out of the side or priorities, sort of a selfish, more of a selfish mindset, and I definitely agree with that. But then also my concern would be like, you hear people who are like, oh, like you're never ready, like, but once that kid comes out of the tummy, you're like,
you gotta get ready.
Yeah. Like, apparently that's when you become ready, and not a second before. But
yeah,
I think it's great that you acknowledge, like, you have 3 older siblings who have done the very traditional way of, you know, getting married, having kids. So like you would think that there is a pressure on you automatically, but I think it's great that you acknowledge, like, that's not what I want to prioritize right now. And you've already achieved so much, like, career wise. And I think it's great that you've
not career, but I've done some
but
school.
I don't know how to word it. But, you know, just personally, you've achieved quite a lot. And I think it's great that you've prioritized that and know that that's what's going to make you happy right now, and not just follow suit. Like, all right, my 3 older siblings got married and had kids in their mid to late 20s. So that's what I'm going to do too.
Yeah. I think that's
Yeah.
a good way to be, just like acknowledge that life is happening right now and this is the present time, and you're just going to experience that fully, opposed to kind of like, let's check these boxes so that I'll then have I don't know, have some resentment or regrets later in life if you didn't do what your personal goals were now.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think being the youngest in the family, you're put in an interesting position, because you have the opportunity to see what your siblings are doing, and often they're going first with these life-changing decisions. So Brennan, like, you could see some of your siblings having kids, and that might actually be like, whoa, like I want to wait here. Like, I don't want to get into this too quickly. So you have that opportunity to see siblings go through it first, and almost they, depending on the decision, you could say they bite the bullet or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think in high school specifically, and like when we were younger, I appreciated having 2 older siblings who went through stuff first and like kind of wore down the parents, so that Ollie and I had a little bit of a more relaxed transition into like partying, going out, and not as many consequences, I guess.
Yeah, you'll definitely feel a little bit of the pressure though as it goes on. I certainly could see that, where if all your siblings are taking this specific path, you don't want to be the odd one out in a sense, and the likelihood is that your parents are also, if their first 3 kids went in a certain direction, they probably are pushing the 4th to go along that road too.
I would actually say in our case, it's actually the opposite for you. I wouldn't say that there's the pressure from our parents for you to follow suit. They're like, actually, we saw what the other ones did.
Well, I think
you should hold on.
I think as parent, like, I for sure, definitely not dad. Like, dad's like, go at your own pace, whatever. But I don't think mom would be like upset if I
had a kid.
Yeah. Oh, maybe I had a kid. But yeah. One thing I wanted to ask you guys, and I guess Amanda can attest to this, has, like, growing up in a bigger family, have there been maybe like double standards or different ways that your parents might like raise you, I guess, or in terms of like, oh, well, he got to do that and I didn't, or like,
that's a really good question. Ollie?
I think so, for sure. Kailey, you can defend yourself on this one, but I feel like Kailey being the only girl in the family, there may have been some double standards or a little bit more
favoritism
or support. I don't know if you see that yourself, but I think I could see that a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know what to say, because I can't say 100% either way. Like, I can't necessarily say that I felt spoiled or that being the only girl was really different growing up.
You know what? It might not actually have been. It might have been more of a dad thing. Just like you're the only girl, and he's more protective, perhaps, of you.
That might be it. I know, like, in our family, we have the joke that, like, Sammy is hands down the favorite child. He, like, can't do anything wrong, and my parents still, like, bend over backwards so Sammy has what he needs. But part joke, part accuracy, I'd say. Yeah. So interesting. I don't necessarily. It's a good question, Brennan. I don't know how to answer that, because it's so hard when you're in it to
you don't
know.
Want to expose yourself.
The spoiled brat over here. But, everything is perfect for me. I don't know. I'm sure like it has to happen. What about you guys? Because there's 2 girls in your family, 2 boys. So was there a difference?
I have a feeling that Brennan has an opinion on this.
What do you mean?
About like preferential treatment in the family or?
Yeah. Well,
I think you actually were the favorite, like not the favorite, I shouldn't say, but like because you're the baby, you were so babied, like, you know, like you had a lot done for you, being 4 years younger than me too. So like the rest of us were older, and you were, you know, a lot of stuff was done for you that wasn't necessarily done for us, which
Definitely.
I'm not bitter about. I mean, good for you.
Yeah. I also think like on the contrary, and I think mom and dad have spoken to this, it's like by the time you have your 4th child, and like there's like a decent gap between like myself and Amanda and yourself and Kailey, Ollie, like they're a nice 4-year timeline. Like at a moment in time I thought I may have been a whoopsie or
thought might have passed by my mind too,
but I don't know if there are any particular favorites. Like we all definitely have different relationships like with our own parents, and I think that's just sort of.
And has that changed over the years? Like, was there? I know I've heard that, and well, actually now we probably have to have your parents on the podcast. This is more a question for them. I hear that one of the hardest relationships is the adult-child parent relationship. So there's the really challenging time of when parents are raising teenagers, and that is just really stressful usually on everyone. And then the next one is the adult child parent, where that dynamic is really, really changing because you're having a full-blown adult who, you know, is choosing different things, and yet you're, as the parent, you're still kind of having these expectations and maybe hopes for your child. And so have you guys found a shift, or even just amongst the siblings, where how you guys interact with each other?
Yeah, definitely. For sure with I think the relationship that I have with my parents when I was like between like 10 and 14, I would call myself like a bratty child for sure, like an absolute just ruckus, like a pretty shitty kid.
You really were.
Yeah. But I turned out okay. But like
You've come a long way.
Yeah, I would say especially with my mom more so, because she used to like drive me places, and like my dad was working and stuff, so my mom was like driving me to hockey and everything.
Yeah, shout out to moms, because
no, she did so much.
Yeah.
But
Susie,
definitely
Angel,
I think, but yeah, between the ages of like 10 and probably, hopefully I was out of it probably by 16, would you say? But
maybe like
maybe
20, but
yeah, but I'm happy I got out of that stage of where I definitely probably a little underappreciative of everything that she really did for me. And also, yeah, just sort of conflict resolution wasn't ideal whenever it was an argument with her. And I think that is something that I've improved on. And then, yeah, it's weird. I noticed since COVID, because I moved out in May of 2020, and I noticed like a bit more of like I'm going over to my parents' place for like, I don't know, Sunday dinner or whatever, and like it's like,
yeah,
oh, like I felt a little weird like opening their fridge door, like
Right.
food. It's like, is this still okay? Like, but I'm an adult now. Like, is they gonna yell at me or like? Yeah. So, yeah, I definitely think the relationship with my parents has changed a lot in the last 10 years, and with my siblings, I don't know. I think it's grown stronger, or like it hasn't gotten worse, at least.
Yeah, it's funny. Oddly enough, I actually don't think that between the 4 of us, I feel like it's been quite consistent.
Nice.
Maybe, you know, depending on interests during the times of life that you're at. Like you and Ryan were super nerdy at one point and played in a game together. No offense to gamers, but you know,
throwing some shade out there.
Gonna get some comments. And then, you know, now you guys have similar interests in other things, and I think it's actually been quite consistent between the 4 of us throughout our lives.
That's nice. Yeah. Similar with us, I would say. We've all kind of, I mean, yeah, things have gone up and down, I guess, with, like you said, with interest, like Ben and Sam being in a band and music, and I have zero rhythm. I couldn't really relate to that that portion of their life. But
with the big age gaps, there's definitely periods of life where it's hard to relate to the other people. I don't know if maybe you especially Brennan would have found this, where like Ryan's in high school, like maybe like trying to party and stuff, and like you're still, I don't know what, like you'd be like 10 years old or whatever, like not interested at all. And I definitely found that with like Benji and even Sammy, like they're off partying in the band, and I'm in like junior high school. Playing I barely Minecraft. Know what anything is. And playing Minecraft and stuff like that. It's just a completely different thing. But I was wondering, Brennan, have you felt this where like, because you've been the youngest by such a gap, there's been an encouragement to mature quicker, or maybe perhaps even slower? But I'm just thinking, like, if you're at a stage where you're still relatively childish and you show up to like family gatherings and then all your siblings are like, we've been there, like it's enough, like you can't be doing that anymore, like we were there 4 years ago, and like you're a little bit out of place and out of time with everybody else's development, so there might be a bit of a rush.
I would say that like growing up, especially like when I was in elementary and middle school, like all my siblings would be partying together and drinking, and I was like, I was playing Call of Duty till like 4 a.m. Like, I was not partaking in that, and there's definitely some sense back then, whereas like, oh, like I'm kind of left out, like I can't get and drink and party with them, but at the same time, like I think
you might get into that a little bit quicker.
For me,
I definitely got into it.
Sure,
I think there's definitely some encouragement. And then I think, but like you said earlier, I was in grade 5, and I think my brother was going off to university, and it was like in such a different at that point in your life. Right. It's like I don't even know what university is. Like I'm worried about my math test. Like so, in that situation, it's like it's definitely harder to
bond almost.
You don't even know what that person's doing in their life, really. But I mean, he's still my older brother, and it's still like obviously a good relationship. But definitely at different stages in my life where the gap was so big that I was like kind of doing my own thing, where they are all sort of relatively the same pace in life. So I guess that's still the case now, but now we're like now that I'm in mid 20s and they're all in there. Are you 30? 29? Yeah,
still young.
Still in our 20s. I feel like that gap has closed a lot. I don't know if you feel that way, but
definitely. Like as people get into their 20s, I feel like the gap just almost shrinks almost to zero. Maybe once you get into like everybody's in their 30s, then it absolutely shrinks to zero. But like when I'm 16 and Kailey, you're 20, being 4 years older, there's quite a bit of a difference. Like you probably saw me as like, I don't know, just a child still, really, and you thought you were quite old, but where if you compare to if you compare to like Benji when he's 24, there's quite a big gap. But as we all move into our 20s and late mid 20s and stuff like that, everybody seems like on a similar level. Do you agree?
Yeah, I 100% agree, and it's nice. I actually think it's something I appreciate as we get older. The ability for us all still to hang out and become closer because we're in a more relatable time in our life. So it's cool. It's nice. And even just having you guys here to talk like this, at certain points with you guys being younger, you know, we maybe wouldn't have been able to have like the same conversation, but now that we're all in our 20s, it's like
a cool thing to do now.
It's like a cool, it's like really hip. So
I think it also like, it's like, okay, now we're all in the same stage, we're all in our 20s, but then I find that shift happens again once people start having kids. Then there's a difference again. It's like you all were at the same stage, and then someone has a kid or kids, and then the kids keep coming, and then that I find at least I did, Brennan, before I had my first last year. I found like all of a sudden there was another kid. There's another difference then. And that change between someone who has a child and someone who doesn't becomes quite large. I found that when I didn't have kids. I found you and I actually, even though we're the greatest difference apart in age than the other siblings, you and I probably lived the most similar lifestyles and had the most in common than, compared to me with my other siblings who have kids. I found that.
I would definitely agree. And also, just to go back, Ollie, to what you said about maybe feeling a little rushed to go to the next chapter of my life because my siblings would, you know, they're already there, sort of thing. I think, like, now that I've given it some thought, yeah, I would say the one thing for sure is that with all my siblings, they've sort of you guys have always sort of been in the dating scene. Like, I feel like ever since you've been in like grade 9, you've always had a boyfriend.
Yeah, we all have very strong dependency issues.
Maybe it's just horrible dependency issues. But I would say that's definitely one thing I can think of where my siblings have had a direct influence on me. It's like growing up, I see them all with girlfriends or boyfriends like since I can remember. Like, I was in grade 3, and you probably already had a boyfriend at that point. And
Right.
it's like, I've definitely, I don't know if I would say so, because I've definitely, not that I'm like a serial dater or whatever, but I would say I've definitely desired, you know, like a meaningful relationship with.
Right. That's a really interesting observation.
Since I was like probably in grade 11.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I've definitely, it's not to say that I was like unhappy single, but I think that, all else equal, like generally speaking, like if you're with someone that you really enjoy, like your peak happiness level, I think can even get bumped up a little bit more.
Right.
Like, yeah.
Right.
Well, I think that's
beautiful.
Yeah. It's like maybe not a direct family expectation, but definitely a subtle one. You just see what they're doing and feel as though you should be doing that.
True.
Maybe a couple hints or comments here and there at Christmas dinners and stuff,
Right.
but
not a direct communication on that usually. Maybe
Sometimes,
depends.
but
Depends. Yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes. But
have you guys found there's ever any like competition between siblings? I know I'm a relatively competitive person, and I think our family in general is quite competitive. And how have you guys found that within your immediate family, and how have you kind of navigated that competitive landscape?
I actually thought about this before coming here on the podcast, the idea of competing in families. I think it's just such a recipe for disaster to tear families apart.
Yeah.
You know, even with friends, right? Like, you know, no matter if you don't have a big family, but you have a really close friend group, it's the same thing. It's like you're just asking for an unhealthy relationship.
No, but he's not like, not necessarily like with like, oh, who has a better job, more like, but there could be like fun and friendly competition, like.
Well, yeah, I mean, sorry, like, hey, a running race, sure, that's fun, but not if you will have, you know, insecurities about like, oh, I'm not as fast of a runner, and then it could affect your confidence, things like that.
Performance is everything in your family. Like, let's say you're like, we're gonna do a family run together, and you're like, oh, it's just for fun, but then your family continues to heighten the competition to be like, everyone must do the absolute best they can, and you can run faster.
And different skills aren't valued, you know, like, so it's like, okay, if you're not a good runner, but you're a fantastic writer or something, that needs to be valued or acknowledged, like, oh, that's a great skill you have, things like that. Because the idea of like physical ability, I think we can all say in our extended families, in our immediate family as well, you know, physical ability, like who's strongest, who's the fastest, you know, that's always been
a lot of arm wrestling,
you know, which is fun, but you know, it's fun if you're good at arm wrestling. It's not so fun if you're not so good at arm wrestling.
It's such a good point, Amanda. And even within our family, like I think at the beginning, like when Benji and Sammy were first starting out in the music scene, I think a little bit like they weren't like pursuing the same things that other people in our extended family were pursuing in you know, getting this certain degree or whatever. And I think I feel for them a little bit, because I'm not sure people like gave them the support. And I don't mean in our family like anyone specific, but just I see it kind of in general with different talents, where people are like, oh, are you doing this specific thing? And if you're not in this category and you're into the arts or music, like there's sometimes within families like, oh, okay, but that's cool, but like as a hobby, you know, and you don't kind of have that same support. So
yeah, I think like if you get into the overly competitive mindset and you're always comparing to other people, it can be toxic, whether it's family or not, but specifically in family, because it can tear people apart, or at least make people not as happy when other people are succeeding. Like, let's say the whole family is like, oh, like Kailey, like, well done. That could actually make some other family members feel bad about themselves, which isn't an ideal scenario, but that definitely does happen, where you'll see in families one person or maybe a couple people are being highly celebrated for whatever their achievements are, and that can create a weird dynamic, I think, and And to touch back on the competitive thing, I feel like it could even apply to career, not just like things like running and of that nature. Have you felt that too in like career, like what you're getting in school, like what your grades are? Like, was this ever a competition and comparison? And Kailey, you can talk on this too if you felt our family has had a little bit of that too.
I think a little bit. Like I mentioned in the beginning, because our dad like works in the science field, I felt pressure indirectly, because he certainly wasn't doing it on purpose, but just indirectly the idea that we should all have a science background and then we should all pursue the sciences in some way, not to have a career in it, but just that in high school and perhaps beyond. But otherwise, I don't really know. Ollie, is there something that's coming to mind for you? Because I can't say that we really. Yeah, there's nothing really. I like just the being like fit, I guess, and like taking care of ourselves.
Nothing
kind of like
specific really comes to mind, but I'm pretty interested in that idea of comparison, because I find for competitive individuals especially, it's hard to escape that, where you oftentimes are naturally comparing to other people. And if you get deep into that mindset, what can end up happening is that if you're at let's say it is a race and it's a 100-meter dash, and you're at the 30-meter mark, and somebody goes from the 70-meter mark and they go to the 80-meter mark, they're making progress, and that should be great. You should congratulate them for that. But in your mind, it might actually make you feel worse, because now you're 50 meters away from them and you set them as your standard because you're comparing to them. And I find that, like I was saying, for competitive people, that it's a difficult thing to detach from, I think. And I've been trying to do that a lot, where you focus more on the mentality of compare yourself to who you were yesterday, or compare yourself to your own progress in the past. Have you guys found that at all, where like you might get into a trap of comparing to other people? It could be family specifically, it might not be, but and that their progress sometimes may make you feel worse, even though you didn't actually change. Your position stayed the same.
Yeah, I think that's definitely been the case for me. I think it's hard not to, not just with family, but I think with friends and in people that you see, like influencers online, it's pretty easy to get caught in the trap of like, wow, like they're my age, or they're like 20 years old and they have X amount of followers, and they're, wow, they're sponsored, and they're like, it's so easy to be like, wow, I'm not doing enough. Like I'm like, what am I doing with my life? Like, there's look at all these people and look what they're doing and accomplishing. And then there's like, and how do I compare to that? But I think it's super toxic to actually do that. Like, I think it's way better, to compare to who yourself, like just compare yourself to who you are. But just touching up on the competition thing, because I definitely did have a bit of an opposing view to Amanda, or a bit of a different take, because
here we go.
Well, no, I think I think competition is great. And I don't think forced competition is good, though. So if you want, like, if an 8-year-old boy or girl is being forced to run and they're crying and they don't want to do it, like, that's absolutely wrong. But at the same time, if they want to run the race and they end up getting last place, I don't, like, it's the whole argument of like the participation trophy of like, oh, great job, you finished the race, you did so good. It's like, well, you finished last. It's like, do you really want to be praising your child who finished in? And I know it's a fine line. It's like you still want to be supportive, but it's like, what are you really teaching them if it's like, great job, you finished last? Like, you don't need to improve. Like, you're so good, how you. And it's like, I think you need to be careful. And it's like, you mentioned that race thing too. It's like, if I'm running a 100-meter dash at whatever age and I'm at the 30-meter mark and someone's at the 80, it's like, I would see that as like, wow, I suck. Like, I need to improve. Like, or this person's like maybe just really good, but I would tend to think that I'm super slow if they're like 50 meters ahead or whatever. So it's like, I would tend to think more of along the lines of, if the race is something that I wanted to do, or whatever that like that competition is, I don't know, at least for myself, and I think how I will go about parenting one day is definitely definitely being supportive of whatever my kid wants to do, but at the same time, you know, am I going to let my kid win every game of basketball? And it's like, no, maybe at a younger age, but when they're like 12, 14 and they want to wrestle me or like play, I'm not going to like hurt them.
Go hard.
But I'm not going to go, I'm not going to go easy, because I don't think that teaches them the right thing.
I agree with that. I think that's good. And just having realistic expectations. And also I think what transfers over when your child comes last in a race and you're saying, you aren't the absolute best like runner right now, but that there's improvements in every aspect of your life at any time, that's just the way life is, that you're not going to hit the ground running being the absolute best that you can be.
Yeah, I think sorry.
I was just going to say, I like what Brennan brought up there about that these days there's so many people you can compare yourself to with social media and the internet. So if you have any talent in any area, but you're always looking online and seeing everybody else's ability, there's always going to be somebody out there that is better than you. So there's always going to be somebody out there that you can see and compare to and feel as though you're not very good. And that's what I think maybe these days especially we need to be like careful with when you're cruising around on the internet is you can often make yourself feel bad just by looking at what everybody else is doing.
Yeah. And I think it also depends on if we're talking about like children versus adults here. You know, children that are just developing their confidence and understanding where they get self-worth from. You know, it changes when you're an adult, because, you know, you can't be fooled as much as you can. You know, you can tell a child they're fantastic at everything and they're going to believe you. Whereas an adult is obviously different. So I think in terms of parenting, if we bring this back to parenting, like, I understand like the whole participation trophy thing is a bit controversial, but maybe more importantly is not the participation trophy, but instilling the, you know, telling the kid what they are good at, or telling them that they should be proud of themselves, and that, you know, not to be looking for, you know, as opposed to saying, I'm so proud of you for running that race, even though you lost, you know, saying like, you must be so proud of yourself for
like,
running
look at
that
the
race.
work you put in, and also like that it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. So it's not about the end result of what was your time on the race, but rather like, wow, I noticed the dedication that you put into that.
Yeah,
and
you worked so hard. Yeah,
you were going for those runs, and you were trying really hard. And look at your improvement from when you started training in October, and then you ran your race a couple months later, and that's really awesome. And that you can make even more improvement. Yeah,
and I'm not saying like don't lie to them and say like you must be so proud of yourself. You're such a good runner. If they, you know, lost, you could say you must be so proud of yourself for working so hard. Yeah. And then instilling self-confidence in kids is so important. Like, so instead of them looking to you to be like, are you proud of me? Are you proud of me? Or even like, you know, even not even as a parent, but even friends that you may have that, you know, making sure that they look at themselves and say, oh, I'm so proud of myself for achieving this. Even if I didn't do great, I worked really hard at it. And yeah, maybe it's not the path I go down, but I'm proud of myself for just trying.
Yeah, you know, I really like that. I really like that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point of, especially at a young age, trying to get your kids into that mentality of comparing themselves based on their previous abilities. Because a lot of kids, if they go to school or any competitive event, there can only be one person that wins the race. And so if there's a race full of hundreds of kids, there's a lot of kids that aren't winning there, and a lot of kids that might leave that event feeling like they're failures, or they didn't do the right thing. But like you guys are saying, like, if previously they had a worse time and now this time they competed better, that's really what you want to get their focus on. And I think that's going to be huge for their self-esteem as well, actually, just because their self-esteem is not going to be tied to whether they won or lost. It's going to be tied to, did they perform better than last time, or did they perform did they put everything they had on the table in the event. And that's all you really can ask from anybody is did you put it all on the table? Maybe your all on the table is not as good as the person who won, and that's just the way it's going to be, especially in physical events. There might be some naturally gifted people, and you can give your all, and you're still going to come up short, but to still accept that as a win, given that you did better than what you did last time, I think is crucial for kids to learn early, I think.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. I think it's really important to give your children praise and everything, but just to play a bit of devil's advocate for fun, I think on the opposite end, and I'm not sure if you guys have experienced this with friends or people that you know, but there's people that I know in my personal life, and like, have you ever seen those parents before where like the way they speak about their children as if they're the second coming of Jesus Christ? Like it's like they're so talented and skilled at everything, and they let everyone know. And it's like the issue is that when you tell and give your children that feedback, or your child, and they come into the real world and they're like, oh, like I'm not
super average,
like like this isn't how it was supposed to be played out.
A very big humbling experience of their abilities next to everyone else's.
You can set them up for a disaster, because they'll come out to events and stuff with that mentality of, oh, I'm the absolute best, I'm like you said, second coming Jesus Christ. So
there's more peace,
and that gets crushed.
There's more peace when I find when the expectations are, like, for better or for worse. My parents were pretty open about my skills and what I wasn't good at, so there's definitely there's two sides of that. On one hand, I see the negatives, but then on the other hand, I feel like there is just the acceptance in myself and the peace that I'm not trying to be the best. I'm very aware of what I'm good at and what I'm not good at, and it's a relaxing place to live, that I'm not up there constantly trying to compete with whether it is my parents' expectation of me or other people.
Yeah, and I think that, like what we've been saying here, has definitely applied for this podcast specifically. And Brennan, you brought up the internet and how you can compare to other people. I'm sure for this podcast, if I compare to all the millions of podcasts that are out there on the market, I might see them and think, oh, they're saying more valuable things, they're more entertaining, they're more valuable in whatever way. But the marker that I try to gauge the success of the podcast by is, where did I start? Because like you could look at Joe Rogan's podcast and say maybe he's 90% of what goes on his podcast is valuable, and maybe the first podcast that I ever did, maybe it was at like 20%. But as long as you're progressing, I go from 20% to maybe eventually you get in like 60, 70%. Maybe I'll never get to the level that Joe Rogan's at, but because I was comparing to what I was when I started, there still is the progress and there still is a feeling of success, because it's so easy, especially in the days of the internet, to look at what everybody else is doing and feel like you're not doing something good, because there are other people that are further along in the journey. Maybe they had more natural talent, and you can always look to them and say, oh, why am I even doing this? I'm not good in comparison to everybody else. But because you see the individual progress and you're okay with progressing from 20% to 30%, even though there's other people out at 90%, because you still made a 10% progress. And that I feel like is critical for like staying on the path, because it can be very discouraging to compare to these people that have been in the game for years and years, whatever game it is, podcasting, whatever game anybody's in. It could be your career and you're looking at other people. As long as you're making progress and that's your main thing that you're determining your self-esteem and your success on, I feel like that's crucial. And for kids especially, like
I feel like I could use that reminder all the time. I often tend to get a little ahead of myself and I think I mentioned on the podcast before, with just seeing, I expect to be like, if I want to do something, I expect to be right up there with the best of them. And if I'm not, then it's like, oh, well, then I'm not good at this. When in reality, it's just like, I just haven't worked as hard, or I just haven't had the experience.
Yeah, or even like, oh, I shouldn't even be doing this because I'm not able to match the level of the people that are at the top, which is a tricky thing to do, but
like, it's been like 10 years, then maybe that's a good call. But
true.
Enough time. It's like,
no,
okay,
I agree. And you also kind of rely on family, I think, in that time to kind of say like, hey, like, love this, but let's explore.
Let's make this more of a hobby than a career.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, bringing it back to family, I think, as Kailey just mentioned, it's like you need a constant reminder of this for yourself. Like, we're all talking about this like this is easy, but realistically, I think we can say we've all struggled with this more than one time in our lives. Yeah. So bringing it back to family, it's important for us, whether this means family as in blood relatives or if this means, friends or whatever, but it's important to kind of be that reminder for each other, because it's so much easier to remind someone else, oh my gosh, no, you're doing great. Like, look at where you were last year.
Yes.
Than to be the person that's in their head saying like, oh, I'm not that good.
Yeah, totally. Because you're in it. It's harder. It's sometimes easier from an outside perspective to be like, oh, I've seen all the progress you made. Are you kidding? Like, and then,
I think because reality is like, there's always going to be someone who's either your age or younger, or they're just achieving a lot more. But I mean, that's a pretty toxic mindset to have, and because I think we can all see it. Like, we can all go on Instagram or TikTok or whatever and be like, wow, like, this is what am I doing? But no, I agree, Ollie, with what you said. Like, it's a very toxic mindset to have, that of like, wow, like I'm nowhere near this person in terms of what they have achieved. Like, why? What's wrong with me? But I agree. Like, you can. You're doing yourself a disservice to actually, to right off the bat, like, to compare yourself to these people who have crazy amount of experience, or they have many years under the belt, and it's like it's like if in 20 years you still haven't whatever it may be, like if I was lifting weights for 10 years or whatever, and like, or 5 years, and I didn't see any improvement, it's like, okay, like, I'm probably doing something wrong. But I'm interested in the expectations, and even tying that comparison thing back to the family, because I feel like the closer your circle, the more you feel that comparison. Because there might be people out in Europe or in any other part of the world, and you might see them on Instagram, and you feel a little bit bad when you see what they're doing. But I feel like the impact increases the closer you bring the circle in. So when you see your direct family members doing certain things, or you see some of your friends doing it, that has a bigger impact on how you feel, whether you feel good or bad about what you're doing. And I thought an interesting example of that is the like, when you see people protesting the wealthiest 1%, if you're able to, in North America, if you're able to expand that zone, I was gonna have a field day on this.
No, and I'm not trying to say I'm against the protests or for them. I find this an interesting idea, is that when you're talking about the 1% in North America, and people are upset about that, but you expand the circle, like I was saying, if you expand the circle from your friends and family out to other people, the impact doesn't feel as big, because a lot of the people upset about the 1% in North America actually are in the 1% worldwide. So it's because it's a closer circle that you get more upset about it. You're more concerned about who's the 1% in my city, and then next, who's the 1% in my country, who's the 1% in my in this continent. And as you expand it, it's less of an impact, I feel, when it comes to comparison.
It's like you all of a sudden realize, like, oh wait, I'm in the 1%.
Like,
right.
Tweeting on their iPhone, like, air conditioned home, being like, F the 1%. I think I find myself, like, sometimes I catch myself complaining. Like, it could be like pretty small things, like, oh, I have, like, maybe I wake up with a sore back, or like I'm unhappy with how things have recently gone with work or stuff, and sometimes it definitely does affect my day or week or whatever, and then I sort of like reflect, and I've tried really hard in more recent years to be like, always be expressing gratitude, because I realize, like, oh my God, like, some of the things that I complain about, I'm like, I am such a bitch. Like, I'm not like smarting up, like, when because what you said about, like, when you zoom out and, like, you see what actually is going on in the world, and it's like, it's like, oh, like I didn't get that PR I wanted, or like my work performance is down, or like I'm upset because my routine's off. It's like, there is literally, like, almost nothing in my life that I should really allow to, like, get myself down when you think, like, like what people are actually going through.
Yeah, but it's like a tricky thing though. Some of your problems are real problems, and just because there's someone out there with a worse problem, I feel like you guys have talked about this on the podcast before, but just because there's someone out there that has a worse problem than you doesn't mean. And I mean, expressing gratitude for everything you have in your life is a great habit to have. But yeah, like thinking that your problems, you can't complain about anything, you know. If something disappointed you, you have all the right to be upset about that, because you will literally never be able to be upset about anything in the world that happens to you if you look at it the way you just expressed it.
And I think you already have the like thoughtfulness of other people and their experience, just the way that you just described that. So you don't need to be too hard on yourself for, you know, complaining or like being disappointed in something, because you have that awareness that other people do have it worse, and I'm still human and I can be disappointed by simple things that are in my life. So I think that's just the awareness part, is just knowing that, yes, okay, wait, let me get a perspective shift here, and I don't have it that bad, but it's okay. I'm still disappointed that, you know, my back was sore today. That's okay.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing to keep in mind where your zone of comparison is, because like if your zone of comparison is on specific people, you might feel ashamed or bad because their achievements are surpassing yours. But then if you shift that zone of comparison to other people, now all of a sudden you feel very grateful and you feel very good about yourself. And where should that zone be? It's hard to say, but I think it's just a good idea to keep in mind, who am I comparing to in general? Am I comparing to those people, and how does that make me feel? And could I maybe just compare to somebody else? Like, well, I think it's just a good idea to keep it in mind. Where am I looking, and who do I look to compare?
Oh, you I don't know if we brought this up on the podcast, but you brought up you can't really be jealous of someone else unless you would take 100% of their life. Like, don't bother wasting your time being jealous of someone unless you want 100% of your life. And anyone, if you you know, they'll like walk a mile in their shoes, you are going to discover that it's like, oh, this wasn't all I was cracked up to be, or like the comparison and jealousy I had is,
everyone has problems.
Yeah. What's the saying too? Like, if everyone were to put their problems in a pile, you would probably take yours back.
Yeah.
And I think it's just good to
keep it in mind and try to compare to yourself if possible. I feel like impossible to compare solely to yourself. Like, we live in a society, we live with other people. Like, we're guided so much by what the people around us are doing, and as part of that, which is another topic I wanted to bring up, is expectations, personal and like family expectations, personal expectations are shaped a lot by who is around you. And I was just wondering, for you guys, have you found like there have been very high expectations or low expectations? Because with expectations and where you're expected to aim at, I feel like that very significantly determines where you end up going. Where you're aiming and what you're expecting to get out of life really determines to a high degree where you end up going. And I think sometimes what can happen, depending on the environment, some people have very low expectations for themselves, and they don't believe they're worthy of achieving certain things, and as a result they don't strive for those things. And in an opposite sense, what could happen is that people get extremely high expectations, some that are maybe impossible to meet, and as a result you feel like you're always coming up short. And I think to keep in mind, where are my expectations? Am I not pushing myself far enough, or am I asking for too much of myself, is a good idea. And those expectations, I think, are shaped a lot by your family and your friends and your environment. Have you guys found that you in general feel like you have overly high expectations or not very high expectations? You put a ceiling on yourself as to what you're able to achieve, and where do you think a lot of that's come from? Do you think it obviously will come from family, friends, and your environment, because where else is it going to come from? You know, like if you're born on an island, like you don't have really any expectations. So it is coming from family and friends and those things, and it can be shaped for the better, for the worse.
I think I agree. It does come from family and friends a lot of the time. As I've gotten older, personally, I found that my expectations are way less on what my family and friends are doing and what my family expects of me. I'd say my self-worth is a lot more derived from within. And I would say, like, my expectations of myself, like, prior to having a kid, like, my career-wise, they were way higher than they are now, which, you know, it could be good, it could be a bad thing. But maybe, yeah, now that you said it, though, I thought I had high expectations upon myself, but I do think there are some ceilings. Like, all right, I achieved this. I'm good here now. Yeah. But it's exhausting to always have new expectations on yourself because you're like, oh, I achieved that. Oh, I thought I'd be happy here, but I'm not. So I got to go achieve this next thing.
On top of everything else going on in life, to also like maintain expectations in all these different categories. You're like, I must keep working on all of this stuff.
Yeah. You're never going to be happy if you constantly move the line, which, you know, and it could be a good thing to constantly move the line as long as you have a healthy relationship with it, that you're not going to be disappointed.
And if it is overall fulfilling you and making you just, you're enjoying the process and all that. So it depends on what you're working towards. If you're procrastinating all the time on something, maybe it's the wrong thing that you're working on.
Yeah. I would say, when I was like in high school, I remember just being like, I want to make, you know, like $500,000, like just very blindly, like no idea what I wanted to do. Like that. And I was like 15. It's like, I want to make X amount of dollars, and like, just like zero idea how I was going to get there, and just be like, you know, I'm just going to go into business, and like, I'm just going to, you know, like, and I'll get my degree and I'll be successful. And then you get like, you finish your undergrad and you're like, you get served the humble pie of like, oh, like,
here's an entry level.
Never mind. Yeah. Here you go. Yeah. So it's like, oh, never, like you don't just get it. Like, I mean, obviously not in my, like, I've come to realize even the short time that I've like been working full time is that like, between like, you know, freedom and spending time with other people, it's like, I've come to realize that I definitely don't place that same amount of weighting of like, oh my God, like I want to make crazy amounts of money, as opposed to even when I was 16 and stuff, because like and like just like
maybe you value time with the people you care about more, or your free time. I for sure now, my expectations of people that I care about and in our family is like, as long as you're happy and you're feeling good about your, like, you feel fulfilled or you have some passions, I'm like, absolutely wonderful. Whereas I felt like when I was younger, I kind of thought that I was like, oh, okay, well, everyone I know will get jobs and everyone will be doing these specific things, and that's kind of like where it falls. And now I'm like, if you are enjoying life, absolutely, you keep doing what you're
supported,
doing.
I think that's a good point of trying to get the people in your circle aware of what your expectations are, because your expectations are gonna change as time passes, like you're saying, Brennan. And if people still think you have that expectation that you had when you were 16, they might be calling you out like, Brennan, what are you doing? You're supposed to be making this, that, and the other. And you're like, no. Like they don't know that it had changed. And another thing on that is that, like, if other people know that you have a certain expectation for yourself and they see you falling short, they can be a good support person, because they can catch you and say, like, I know this is what you're trying to achieve and you're down right now, but they can help you get back up. And that's one thing I feel like can be super valuable if a family or a group of friends is able to get that going, where people understand where other people's expectations are, and they're able to keep the other people accountable. Because that's one thing that I would definitely value. And I know, Kailey, you want, like you said, oh, I just want everybody to be happy and that's it. But there definitely would be certain occasions where, like, I'm maybe feeling down and out, and I'm like, oh no, I'm giving up on whatever goal that I had. And it would be nice if other people are like, no, like, you need to keep going, because you know that is my clear goal that I've brought up at another time.
For sure.
Because it can be a difficult thing to do, because you see somebody down, they're feeling bad about their lack of achievements towards their goal, and you might want to just be like, it's okay, like, it's fine, you can leave it aside. But if you know that they've previously established that goal is very, very important to them, then you can give them different advice. Yeah.
Like a reality check. Like, just get them out of their head a bit, be more encouraging figure for them.
I think so. And it's true. I hesitated to say I want the people I care about to be happy, because happy to me is like a very subjective, comes and goes, and it's like, you know, it's more of an emotion you feel 100 times in a day or 5 times in a day. It's not necessarily like the goal of life, but rather fulfillment. So I guess with that idea of wanting people I care about to have fulfillment in life, it would come to, hey, I know you're really exhausted with whatever you're working on, but let's like maybe take a break. Maybe you need more breaks, but I know ultimately this is what you want, and so we just need to like get you back in that.
And I want to add too, like, you don't want to obviously put it all on the other person. Like, you don't want to be like, hey, you didn't bring me up when I was down. Like, a lot of it's on you at the end of the day, but like blame the other person.
I actually thought you were going to bring up something specific. Yeah, it's like, oh, okay.
I think that's where, like, you know, to bring this to family again, it's like we're all so lucky that we have so many siblings, and you know, all of our siblings are here with us in the same city, and we have close relationships with them, and you know, I know that not everyone has that support system, so we're so lucky that we have so many people that we can go to to say, like, you know, to get encouragement, to feel supported,
and different perspectives on different, like, and in our extended family too, like Ollie, you just doing the podcast with our grandparents, talking to people who've experienced different things, and we brought that up before, just we're able to connect with people who maybe we wouldn't otherwise cross paths with, and so being able to get unique perspectives from different people and being exposed to more like career paths and different things that people find fulfilling, I think, in life is really interesting.
Yeah. And Ollie, you mentioned like influence and how like being careful to compare yourself to family and friends is, and like as you zoom out, how does that change? I would say with the friends and family, like say someone's like achieving something like tremendously and it's within the friend or family group, and I know them personally, like I would say them having those personal achievements is almost like a motivational booster for me. Like it, as opposed to like, I see this random stranger on the internet and they're like, and then I would be more like, I would tend to shine a more negative light of like, wow, like this person's achieving so much. And like, you know, like,
because you don't know their true story.
I only know
whereas
like 1% of them.
Friends, you know, like,
right.
you
know
the
like
struggles
genuinely
they went
happy
through
for them, and it's like, oh wow, like it's like almost like an encouragement, a boost, or like, you know,
you saw their hard work and how they got there.
Exactly.
That's true. That's true. And it's much more satisfying. Yeah,
and that's definitely like a great situation when you have that going on, where if you were to achieve something good, you know that the friend that you previously were really proud of is going to be proud of you as well, and not an opposite scenario where you're almost afraid or cautious of achieving things because you're not sure how people are going to take it. Like, you're not sure if people are going to be feel resentful towards you or bitter. To have that environment where people genuinely are happy for you when you're doing good things, I think that's amazing, and sometimes it could be hard to find.
That's how you know they're a real friend or a good family member.
It's actually,
exactly.
It's very like maybe not something people talk about a lot, but it's like such a valuable thing to have people in your life that genuinely want the best for you. That is like such a nice feeling.
And I think you, at least in our case, and hopefully everyone's for the most part, it's like you can always count on like your family for like being, you know, always wanting the best for you, and like truly like through, I don't know, thick and thin, like they're always going to be there to support you and truly want the best for you. Like,
I think we're lucky to have that. I think it's quite uncommon to even have your own family be as supportive as our families
true
are.
For our immediate, I think it's unique that both of our immediate families are as close within the family, you know, like you guys are really close to everyone in your immediate family. We're very close in our family as well, and that's really nice to have.
And having a lot of siblings can either be a good or bad thing in that way, because it's you know, it's not always the case that you have all the siblings are supportive of one another and don't feel like threatened by the other person. So it's nice to have that non-competitive, well, as much as possible.
So we have a balance sometimes. We're all still learning what's good.
Yeah, and unless you guys want to touch on some additional topics, I think we could wrap it up around now. I know Kailey, you gotta head out, but on that note, thank you for being supportive, family members, and thanks for coming on the podcast as well.
Thanks so much for having us. It's been awesome.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Ollie. That was great having us on the podcast, and we'd love to do it again sometime soon.
All right, thanks for listening, everybody. Goodbye.